Welcome to the first edition of the Fantasy Draft Weekly Rundown. I am Ricky Sanders, formerly of Roto Experts and DailyRoto.com, and the guy you see all over the Fantasy Draft locker room. I am the lead contributor. If you've been on the locker room, the past month, I pump out 2 articles a day approximately. Either that or you've probably skimmed mine over like the rest of the public. But with me today is none other than London Fletcher, formerly of the NFL. You've probably seen him. The guy never, ever missed a game, and hopefully he'll never, ever miss a podcast. London, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm definitely going to try to keep my streak alive, with the weekly. Definitely be here for at least 16 weeks this year.
Well, in this podcast, we're not going to go too crazy. We're not going to give you no hour and a half worth of analysis. We do want to give you guys somewhere to start. Guys who we consider to be the plays of the week, the guys that we like. It's more of an introductory podcast than completely in depth. And tell me what you think of this, London. I wrote an article this week about how heading into week one is pretty much a different mindset than any other week. Basically, we don't know anything. I like to make that clear. You and I, we think we do. We have a general idea of player talents and things like that. But, I think this is going to be a perfect week to be contrarian. I think that, if you like a young player, maybe you'll see people writing about him. Maybe you won't. In fact, maybe you'll see people writing things like Melvin Gordon's only a 2 down back. And, watch out for Danny Woodhead and things like that. But I think that this week, if you like Amari Cooper or you like Melvin Gordon or you like Amir Abdullah or you like those guys, it's going to be a week to be contrarian, get ahead of people, and go with what you believe as opposed to what you're reading. What do you think about that?
That's one strategy. Although we do have history, with the veteran guys, track record of a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady. You have those guys track record where okay, the game is not going to be too big for them, whether it's the first game of the season or the last game of the season, Super Bowl, whatever the case may be. So, that's a strategy. If you still want to kind of stay young, there are maybe some second, third year guys that you can kind of look to and still say with a young guy, but does have a little bit of a history.
Is there a rookie that you think stands out for week one? I think mine, Amir Abdullah looks like he's third on the running back depth chart, but I just don't buy that. What do you think? Who is the rookie that you like, not only just in week one, but for this year?
At the running back position, Abdullah's a good one. I like David Cobb, although he just got placed on a short-term IR with the Tennessee Titans, so he'll be a good guy. Tevin Coleman in Atlanta,
Yeah.
he's a
Yes.
guy that I like as a rookie running back. Somebody you definitely want to keep tabs on because if you look at the history of Kyle Shanahan and that system that they run, that zone stretch zone type of run scheme, rookies have been able to produce in that type of system. So he's a guy, if you want to go young at the running back position, he would be one that I would look at picking up.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if the public has seen this update yet, but it looks like Tevin Coleman is on top of the depth chart for week one. I know Devontae Freeman's been dealing with a hamstring injury. I don't know if that's the reason for it. I'm going to guess that Tevin Coleman just flat out outplayed him and that they spent a draft pick on him this year because they wanted him to be the back. I love him. I went to Indiana. He was a guy I loved watching. So I think he's the play. I agree with you. I love Tevin Coleman. But let's get into the actual picks for this week, the ones we've got set up, and we've got some background data on. Let's just go in order for FantasyDraft.com down the roster. We know for the roster we're gonna have to use some quarterbacks, some running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Then we got some flex. We know we've got the flexibility on this site, which I know I love. I kind of don't like being pressed down. If it were up to me for most leagues, I'd go all flex. Hell, I love having the flexibility. So FantasyDraft.com having two of them allows me to be creative, which could be counterproductive for me. Maybe I need to stay within the lines and not color outside, but we'll see. So let's start with week one. I'm going to go with Tyrod Taylor. I think this guy, quarterback, is way too underpriced. I think if you've watched him in the preseason and If you need to see any video of him, just message me. I'll hook you up with any videos you need to see because he's the guy that I've been watching. His highlight reel is quite awesome this preseason. He kind of reminds me of Michael Vick a little bit. I mean, that's probably shooting a little high, but he's got that running ability. He's priced near the bare minimum, which means, you're not spending a lot on him. And I think you're getting 40, 50 rushing yards out of the guy. And we know we love rushing quarterbacks because, especially in cash games, you get that floor. I mean, you get, 5 points for that is the equivalent of what, 125 passing yards off the top of my head. So that's an easy way to get points. All of a sudden, he runs for a touchdown, throws for a touchdown. You got a big performance, and you can use some big players along with them. They do play Indianapolis, which I assume is going to be a fast-paced game. We know Andrew Luck's probably going to put up some points, even against the Buffalo defense. The implied total for Buffalo is 21.8, which is not bad at all. It's very possible there's no LaShawn McCoy or a limited LaShawn McCoy, so Tyler has to take on more of the running game as well. I do worry Sammy Watkins is going to be covered by Vontae Davis, so he won't be an option. But I like Charles Clay. I like Percy Harvin. I like some of the other guys to catch some passes, and I think Taylor does give you sneaky value. What do you like at the quarterback position?
You know, you make some great points when you talk about Tyrod Taylor and all the things that he'll bring to that offense. Still, for me, if I want to go young, I like Teddy Bridgewater. I like Teddy. Teddy had a number of starts last year. He's looked great in the preseason, completing, I think, over 70% of his passes in the preseason. He'll be facing the San Francisco 49ers on Monday night. He gets Adrian Peterson back. So you look at that factor, he's going to be getting a lot of eight-man front, so he'll get one-on-one coverages with his wide receivers. So, they got some guys, Charles Johnson, who they picked up late in the year, who started made some really good plays for them. They got some good tight ends. Kyle Rudolph is one good tight end. So if you want a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, he's not going to be priced like you think at some of the top of the list quarterbacks like Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and those types of quarterbacks. But you can go get Teddy Bridgewater at a reasonable price, and I think he'll produce. You got to think also, San Francisco has lost a lot of key players off their defense from a year ago. No Aldon Smith this year. Justin Smith is retired. No Patrick Willis. I mean, Chris Culliver's gone. It's a no-name defense now that Teddy Bridgewater will be facing.
Yeah, and you got to love guys with nicknames like Teddy Roosevelt as well. I think that's one of the best nicknames in football. And I was actually going to go to the running back position. I had a guy listed ahead of him, but as long as you mentioned Minnesota, I'm going to go with Adrian Peterson. Actually, you mentioned all those guys that were lost from the defense. Aldon Smith, Patrick Willis, Chris Borland, Justin Smith. As a linebacker that you got to make a lot of tackles on the running back, and I think losing guys like Willis, like Smith, like Borland, I think that opens up the running game as much as it does the passing game. And again, this is a situation where we just don't know. But what we think we know is that the 49ers defense went from a good defense to a bad defense. So we do want to rely on some offensive players on Minnesota. And the guy I think, they're going to put right back in there, give him all the carries in the world is Adrian Peterson. I still think he's the focus. I mean, I know people are going to look at other guys and say we have a sample from them last year and probably go in that direction instead. But you look at it, I mean, this is career 5 yards a carry, 86 touchdowns. The last full season he played was a monster year. He only had Matt Castle and Christian Ponder. So now you give him, a useful quarterback with guys in the passing game that can catch the ball. I think Peterson's going to be a monster, and I think it starts week one. So you could go in either direction there. And my money pick, I think this week, a guy that I might have in just about all my lineups, Jeremy Hill of the Cincinnati Bengals. He proved last year that he's the guy there. They had already drafted Bernard. We saw Bernard on Hard Knocks. Everyone fell in love with him, and then all of a sudden, Jeremy Hill's the guy that very next year. The Raiders last season, although you could probably talk more about the linebacker they drafted, supposed to be an absolute stud. They did allow, the most fantasy points to the running back position last season. We know Jeremy Hill was an absolute monster, so I'm taking last year's sample, assuming they add one linebacker, they'll be better, but not great. And I think it's just, at 13,600 as opposed to Peterson, almost 1,000 less. I think you'll get similar production for a cheaper price. You tell me, who do you like at the running back position this week?
A great value pick is I like Chris Ivory, running back for the New York Jets. Chris is going to be the lead back for them. He'll be the bell cow. You think about the quarterback situation with the Jets. They're going to run the ball a lot. They got a defensive minded head coach who wants to play strong defense, run the ball, little ball control offense, not turn the ball over. And Chris Ivory, he's come in motivated. He's lost a ton of weight. I think about maybe 20 pounds, and he looks explosive in the preseason. He'll be facing the Browns defense. That run defense was one of the worst in the league. Lower, I think, in the 30s, 31, 32 in the league, and stopping the run somewhere along that line. I know they went out and drafted Danny Shelton, but he's a rookie, and the Jets' offensive line is really good. They can run block. They have Mangold at the center position, one of the best run blocking centers in the league. So I look for Chris Ivory to have a big game, and you can get him at a fairly good value when as you mentioned, you talk about Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles is going to cost you almost double what Chris Ivory would cost you. A guy I liked it. I know I saw your article today where you have him as a guy to stay away from is Alfred Morris for the Washington Redskins. I look at Alfred and you think about the defense that they're going to be facing, the Miami Dolphins. Well, what's the strength of the Miami Dolphins? Their front, but the strength of that front is the pass rush. So they're not going to. If you're Jay Gruden, you're not going to let them tee off on your offensive line, tee off on Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. You're going to run the ball a lot, and I expect Alfred Morris to get some success and find some creases against the linebackers of the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, and my argument against that was the addition of Ndamukong Suh. Again, we don't really know what the Miami Dolphins defense is with him. I just think he's such a force in the middle, and Alfred Morris is their kind of inside runner. So that just worries me a little. Again, we don't really know. And Alfred Morris is a talented player, and kind of what I've said all along in week one is use talented players in games that people might not be on because we're not sure how these defenses are going to turn out.
Right. Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball, skill player, and let's talk about wide receivers, man. And the prima donnas, as I like to call them. But obviously, in a fantasy game, you need the wide receivers. They're going to put up points. They score touchdowns. They catch a ton of passes. Um, you know, a guy that I like, and he's not going to be inexpensive, is Demaryius Thomas. You coming back. He has Peyton Manning throwing him the ball. He's going to be a healthy Peyton Manning. And they're facing a Baltimore Ravens defense that the secondary is the weakness of their team. So I look for Demaryius Thomas to have a monster game. You want to look at a guy maybe a little bit, doesn't cost as much. Maybe you look at Jordan Matthews. He'll be a big time target for Sam Bradford with the Philadelphia Eagles. Definitely a guy like that, and possibly even you look at maybe an Amari Cooper. You talk about a rookie. You like a rookie wide receiver. Amari Cooper could be a guy that you can draft either. We got multiple positions. You can put four wide receivers in the fantasy draft lineup because of the flexibility. But Cooper's another guy that I would look at.
Yeah, and I love that pick. I love going young this week. And I also like, because I'm probably going cheap at quarterback, the monster wide receiver pick. I agree with Demaryius Thomas, but the guy that I like in that same game with Jordan Matthews is Julio Jones. I mean, the Eagles have made some improvements at corner. They got Byron Maxwell. I know they have Nolan Carroll, but Julio Jones is simply Matt Ryan's guy. I mean, you look at that roster, there's Roddy White who's hurting. You've got Leonard Hankerson, who looked good in the preseason game, but we've seen Leonard Hankerson now in his fourth season, hasn't caught more than 38 passes. I mean, it's just obvious when you look at that offense that with a rookie running back, that if when they open up the passing game, the guy they look to go to is Julio Jones. And so in a game where they have 26 implied points, it's the highest over under of the day overall. The Eagles are projected to score 29, so it could go either way. I think Julio Jones is going to see double digit targets at the very least. And I think this is a guy who catches, 6, 7 passes, could go over 100. And I think he's got to score for them to keep up with the fast paced Eagles offense. Uh, Moving on to tight end. Here's one that I think is going to fly a little under the radar. I know we're not spending up a quarterback. Usually, when I do that, I like to spend up a tight end. But there's no Gronk on this because he plays Thursday night. So you got to kind of go outside the grain here. And I'm going Richard Rodgers of the Packers because I'm not sure of the health of Randall Cobb. And almost regardless if Cobb plays or not, and I do expect him to play, there is no Jordy Nelson who was their red zone threat. Now they've got, I know they just added James Jones, but they've got a guy in Richard Rodgers who's a huge red zone target. And the Bears allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends last season. Being here in Chicago, I'm not really thrilled about the Bears' upgrades in terms of their defense. I don't think it's a giant change from last season. And I think it's going to be more of the same where these big tight ends are able to beat them. I know Rodgers really wasn't a giant factor last year, but I expect him to factor in more this year, especially with no Jordy Nelson. So I think there's a cheap guy who could find the end zone. Tell me, what do you think about both Rodgers and the tight end position as a whole?
Well, Rodgers, he'll be targeted. You talk about somebody has to catch those balls. Now that Jordy Nelson's not on the roster, um, a guy that I like happens to play in that division is Kyle Rudolph for the Minnesota Vikings. Reason being, he's a pass catching tight end in the red zone. Norv Turner, the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, he's always loved his tight ends. Even if you go back to when he was coordinating the offense with the Dallas Cowboys, he had Jay Novacek there. When he was in San Diego, he had Antonio Gates, and now in Minnesota, he has Kyle Rudolph, and he loves to get his tight end the football, especially in the red zone, and give him an opportunity to score some points. Another guy who you can get at a relatively inexpensive price, Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed for the Washington Redskins. Think about Jordan Reed. I wouldn't draft him if this was a season-long type of a league, but because on fantasy draft we're weekly, I'll play Jordan Reed week one because he's going to be healthy, and you got to think about the targets that he'll get in the passing game because you don't want to. If you're Kirk Cousins, you're Jay Gruden in that offense, you're not going to have a bunch of 7-step drops and having your quarterback try to hit the big plays a lot. You'll look for a tight end to work matchups against their linebacking core, the Dolphins, the inside linebackers. They're not great coverage guys. So look for Jordan Reed to be a guy that can produce big points.
There you go. There you go. Jordan Reed and under the radar tight end for week one. Let's quickly go over defense. You could probably give it a better look than I can. You may have a little more experience with the NFL defenses than me, but one defense that I think reigns supreme over the others is the New York Jets. They are a dominant run stopping team. I think they even only got better. They allowed the fifth least rushing yards last season, and that's the strength of the Browns offense. I mean, combine that with the fact they don't really have a great receiver. They added Dwayne Bowe, who I assume is going to be their first receiver, even though the depth chart doesn't say that. And boom, they stick Darrell Revis on him. I just think this is a team with no chance. Vegas agrees with me. It's the lowest projected total, so I think the New York Jets have a possibility for a giant week one. What do you think?
For me, I like the Kansas City Chiefs, and not just for week one. I like them for all season long. You look at the Chiefs defense. They have everything you want. They have two pass rushers, Tamba Hali, Justin Houston getting after the quarterback off the edge. You get back a healthy Derek Johnson. That's going to be key. And also you get back a healthy Eric Berry on the last line of defense in your secondary. So you had those two guys back healthy this season. You got the makings of being the number one defense in the league. They're facing in week one the Houston Texans, who come in journeyman quarterback Brian Hoyer and no Arian Foster. He's out injured. That right there, when you look at it, Kansas City Chiefs is a must play for me if I'm from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, and I think a guy to look for that really I don't think anyone's talking about. Alfred Blue seems to be the backup, but I like Chris Polk as a guy who might, be the guy under the radar, be the guy, because they tried out Blue last year. I don't think he's very good. Maybe Polk sees an uptick, but with that being said, Foster should be back within a month and a half. So it's limited value. Maybe he's worth a shot. All right, let's go to your questions before we bring in a special guest. One that I'm sure many of our viewers have seen before, but let's go, because yesterday I opened up Twitter for questions for you. And
Okay.
let me say that I thought they were going to be all incredibly serious, like what's tackling for and things like that.
All right.
And it turned out people had a lot of fun with it, so I think we should too. And I'm going to ask you a few of the ones that I thought were my favorite, beginning with the one that involved me. This comes from user Josh3302 on Twitter. He
Okay.
asked, "What does London think of my, as in me, puns? What do you think of Ricky's puns?" Was the question.
You know what? I actually like them, man. It takes some creativity on your part. People don't realize how hard it is to be creative, especially when you're doing the pun. So I like them. I enjoy them. It's something that I look forward to each day.
Well, let me tell you, sometimes they do take as long as the article. You're just
Really?
sitting there with writer's block, staring at a screen,
Yes.
and they do take some work, contrary to what the haters out there might think.
Right. Right.
Here was one that I thought was very, very clever and funny. This comes from username Drew Dinkmeyer. You've probably seen his face being sprayed with champagne in the TV commercials before. But he asked you, London, if you could be named after any city in the world, which would you choose? And let me follow up with the fact that I think Bangkok Fletcher has a nice ring to it.
Okay. All right. Bangkok. I like that. So seeing as though I am already named after a city, so we'll discredit London, England, and you know what I like? I think that something like Sioux Falls Fletcher. I think that would be pretty catchy. Sioux Falls Fletcher. What do you think?
I like that. I like that. And the two first names, I'm all about the unique first names. I mean, I when I was looking for dog names, I didn't want to do Sparky or anything like
Okay.
that. I made sure it was the only one in the neighborhood with the name. So I think Sioux Falls is well done.
Okay.
Let's get the t-shirts going.
All right.
All right, and so here is actually a question involving football, which I was hoping we would get one of these, and we did. This is from user Truck1223. He said Brandon Cooks is a favorite for a breakout in season-long leagues, but are you fading him week one against Arizona?
I wouldn't. Brandon Cooks is definitely a great play for a season long. If you were able to draft him, he would be a big play for you. Week one against the Arizona Cardinals, I wouldn't play him. I think there's a lot better matchups you can go out and get at the wide receiver position. You think about the Arizona Cardinals defense, even though Todd Bowles is no longer there, they'll still be a top flight defense. They still have Patrick Peterson. They got cornerbacks. They're going to bring pressure on Drew Brees. So I wouldn't play Brandon Cooks week one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I think Patrick Peterson maybe better suited to guard the big receivers, but the bottom line is the guy is a great cornerback, and
Right.
Cooks at 5'6" against a guy bigger than him, maybe not the greatest matchup.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's go ahead and introduce our special guest that I had teased earlier. You've probably seen this guy's work at Roto World, at DailyRoto.com. He does do some soccer, he does some basketball, but he does some good football work as well. Let me introduce Galen Dragiev. Galen, go ahead and say hi to London and vice versa.
Hey, London, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How are you, Gallon?
Pretty good. Excited for week one.
Oh, yeah. We all are. We all are.
Nice. So I've got two picks for you guys here this week. My first pick is a cash game play. I absolutely love Eddie Lacy. I think he's got a great matchup against Chicago. He's playing on a really good offense, and even without Jordan Nelson, I think Green Bay is still going to do a lot of good stuff. He actually had 42 receptions last year, and I think that might even go up without Jordan Nelson. So I think he's definitely going to benefit from that. Green Bay's favored by 7 points this week in a game with over under 50 points, and I think there's a lot of value to be had there.
Yeah, I like Eddie Lacy. He's actually on my article that I did for week one running backs. I think I had him as my number 3 running back. Um, for a lot of the reasons that you point out, facing the Chicago Bears defense, that I don't like that defense. They're making a switch from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Not the they don't currently have the personnel that fix that scheme. And you mentioned Eddie Lacy being able to catch passes out of the backfield. And I wrote this article prior to Jordy Nelson being injured, so expect them to feature him even more now that Jordy Nelson's out of the ball game.
Yeah, I absolutely love Eddie Lacy. I also have a cheap play for you guys too. I absolutely love Stevie Johnson. He's only about 7,200 on Fantasy Draft. Without Antonio Gates in Week 1, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to catch passes. Reports out of San Diego have been that he loves his quarterback, and they've got a good connection down there. So I think he's going to be a good play as well.
You know, Stevie Johnson is a lot harder to figure out. I wouldn't play him this early in the season just because we don't know what his role is going to be. Coming to the San Diego Chargers, they got some really good wide receivers. Keenan Allen comes to mind right off my head. So I just don't know how many balls he'll be targeted. Just in this offense right away. So I would kind of stay clear of him until we find out what type of role he'll play in the Chargers offense.
Right. Well, I'm excited to find out. Anyway, that's it from me, and let me get Ricky back on the line.
All right, a big thanks to Galen Dragiev for his picks. Now it is time to close out the show. Unfortunately, we've had a great time here with Sioux Falls Fletcher. I am Ricky Sanders. Until the next time, we are out of here. Have fun this week.